Joined now by David Berov, the host of the Eye on the Storm podcast covering the St. John's Red Storm. David, thanks for taking a few minutes today to talk about the Johnnies. I think they've had a very fun season this year. Big East regular season champions outright for the first time since 1985. And this team is set up for a lot of success in March. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about expectations for this team going into the big dance, going into the Big East tournament next week, and all of that. But I want to start with the Red Storm Rising documentary that you have been featured in heavily, because from my perspective, me and our team at the 1831 Media Network, we have been covering the Xavier season this year with our own behind-the-scenes show, the All In docuseries, and we have found it very interesting, all of the access that we've been given, all of the storylines we've been able, to create and be able to tell the story of this team. And we have found it very interesting watching all of these other programs do behind the scenes content of their own. Can you just talk about maybe from your perspective how that's maybe helped your listenership of the podcast or what it's been like to be featured in that?
First of all, Paul, thank you so much for having me on. I think what you and Adam do with Coach Sean Miller is some of the best stuff literally in college basketball. So kudos to you guys. As far as what this has been like, first of all, I had Tom Farrell on the podcast, the guy who it was his idea. And he talked about timing is everything, catching lightning in a bottle. And you couldn't have scripted this any better. Hollywood couldn't have picked a more appropriate time. You talk about Rick Pitino year 2. We know the narrative. All right. It's every single place he has been. It's the launching point. And the fact that you've had cameras there all season to see basically how the sausage is made, how greatness is cultivated, has made it so special. And I've said that we always watch docuseries like this from afar. As fans, we are never ingratiated in what we're watching. F1, Full Swing, the Chicago Bulls, Hard Knocks, but for college basketball, it's a little different. You're watching this and you see yourself in the docuseries. I see all my friends in the Bahamas. It was a surreal experience. We're living and dying with these moments. And then to see those moments played back in such a different angle, to see the locker room footage, to see what we always talk about. At halftime, you and your friends are on the concourse at Madison Square Garden. I wonder what's being said at halftime. Now we know. And 10 million people saw that clip of what Rick Pitino said in halftime of the Providence game before Zuby Ejiofor hit the game winner. It's so special. I hope we see a lot more of this. As far as what it's done for St. John's, I think it's put such an amazing spotlight on the program. I think it's made a lot more people interested in this season. As far as being featured in it, they reached out to me. They said they loved the podcast and they're kind of using me as a scene setter for a lot of things. And it's super cool because my passion is real for the program. I come from it, twofold. I'm covering the program, but it's also in my blood. I went to the school. It's been a team that I lived and died with for over 18 years now, and to be a part of something that's this special this season has been tremendous.
Yes, so St. John's 26-4 this season, Dave. You know this, the second best defensive team in the country by Ken Pom. The offensive numbers have lagged a little bit behind, but like we've seen with Rick Pitino teams in years past, I'm of the mindset that I'm not really sure that the shooting concerns and everything else matters to me as much as it feels like the national narrative has indicated it might to St. John's. And I know the shooting numbers aren't fantastic. In fact, one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country, 338 out of 364 as far as percentage goes. But I'm curious from your perspective as somebody that watches every minute of this team going into March, does that concern you? And do you feel like this is a team that is set up for a ton of success over the next 4 weeks?
I think it would be foolish to say it doesn't concern you because especially when we get into March, Big East tournament, you have to have an element of being hot, especially in the NCAA tournament. If you go up against a team that knocks 14 threes on you and you can't make at least half of that on your own, you're going to be in an uphill climb. Now, that's kind of been the theme of the St. John's season, is that they have been able to kind of fall and lag behind, but have the defense, like you said, second ranked in the country, to get them back into the game. And they're so good from 2 points that they're able to overcome it. Now, I think the narrative that St. John's is this horrific 3-point shooting team and they can't shoot is a little bit lazy. RJ Lewis Jr., who in my opinion is the Big East player of the year, since February 12th, he's shooting 43% from deep. Since the turn of the calendar, he's shooting 37.5% from deep. St. John's has lost 1 game since then. As a team, St. John's is shooting 36% over this last 5 games from deep. So it is a team that is potentially getting it together and could be getting hot at the right time. It is a fairly small sample size. Overall, yes, they're not going to be a team that can rely on the 3. At one point, Davon Smith was shooting 39% from deep. RJ Lewis is getting better, but it's not their strength. Their strength is defense, turning you over, getting in transition, and scoring in the paint on offensive rebounds. That's been their formula for success. It's very similar to what Houston is doing right now, and nobody wants to face Kelvin Sampson's team either right now.
The 4 losses for St. John's this season have come by a combined 7 points, which is almost an unfathomable number to think about. And really, this team should be 27-3 because that Baylor loss should not have been a loss. That shot was not out of his hand when they lost that game. So this could very easily be a 27-3 team. In conference play, they've lost 2 games by a combined 3 points. The 1-point loss to Creighton in their 3rd Big East game of the season, and then the 2-point loss at Villanova back on February 12th. Otherwise, they have pretty much ran through a lot of the Big East season. Now, what I want to ask you is, you look at the Butler game at Hinkle Fieldhouse last week where you win a share of the Big East title. You look at the Xavier game that happened at Madison Square Garden back in late January. Some of these games that are a little too close for comfort. I'm curious from your perspective, how much games like that where Xavier was up 16 or 19 at one point in the second half of that game, St. John's was able to lock it down defensively, same way that Creighton game finished up where St. John's is just able to turn the opponent's water off and say, we'll go win this game with our defense. Do you get concerned that maybe some of those close games catch up to St. John's when you get into March, or do you feel like this defense, you can ride it long enough that it's not that big of a concern to you?
Normally, I would say yes, it's concerning. But St. John's has won this way all season. This isn't a flash in the pan. This isn't something that's just starting to happen. This is their identity. Their identity is to beat you with their defense, and they're not going to blow you out. There hasn't been many blowouts for St. John's, but there hasn't been many losses either. And I think they've been battle-tested pretty well. I think that these last 2 games that you saw St. John's, kind of not really put away Butler, not really put away Seton Hall, is a testament to what Rick Pitino said is pressure with a lot on the line. This is unfamiliar territory. There's a lot of fans of opposing fan bases right now kind of needling St. John's fans, be like, you guys are acting like you haven't been there before and all this winning. And St. John's fans haven't. It is a new thing. But for the players too, a lot of these guys, I think actually none of them have experienced the NCAA tournament. This is very uncharted territory. And I think that the way that they're winning is sustainable. It's perhaps not comforting because you don't want to be in these 2, 3, 4 possession games, but they've found the formula for success. Their defense is suffocating. Zuby Ejiofor, who in my opinion should be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, he is the most improved player of the year, switches 1 through 5. There is not another player in the conference that does what he does. Other teams cannot prepare for him. And I think he is such a linchpin for that defense. RJ Lewis Jr., 6'7", Kadari Richmond, 6'6", Davon Smith speed. Their defense is not easy to prepare for. And when they are connected, like they were in that Marquette game, it is a very difficult task to try and beat this team, especially in the Garden, which is going to be at the Big East tournament, which I'm sure we'll discuss. But in the tournament, and when March rolls around, March 20th, when the first games kind of kick off, teams are not going to be able to prepare for this kind of a defense. And I think that is quite the luxury. And if you talk to most coaches, I think they'll take the team that is so stout defensively, and they'll, take the offense that perhaps doesn't hit 14, 15 threes.
So I do want to springboard right into the Big East tournament here. I just have a couple more questions for you. And first, looking at the Big East tournament. So St. John's is going to be the 1 seed. They're going to play at noon on Thursday in the quarterfinals. They're going to probably play the winner of the Providence and Butler 8-9 game. I don't know if that game 100% is locked in yet. It might be. But it's looking like it's going to trend toward Providence and Butler, at least if the season ended today. Providence has obviously given St. John's some trouble this season.
Yeah.
And then if you look beyond that, Xavier and UConn right now, Xavier might play Marquette in that 4-5 game, but it looks like it'll be Xavier and then one of either Marquette or UConn in the 2:30 game to then play St. John's on Friday night. You look at Xavier, had a double-digit lead in the second half at MSG. You look at UConn, they obviously played a great game, didn't win, but played a great game against St. John's, at Gamble and everything that happened, a couple of weeks ago at MSG. To me, Dave, I'm really interested to hear where the St. John's fan base, or where you especially, lie on. Last year I think it was UConn coronation week, right? And it was very clear that unless something drastically went wrong, UConn was going to win the Big East tournament last season, and that bared itself out. 1 through, I would say, 9 this year, I don't think St. John's would have much trouble with DePaul or with Seton Hall. But if you look even 1 through 9, all the way down to Providence, where it took a buzzer beater at the AMP to beat Providence, St. John's has come a long way since then. But where do you sit on St. John's as the number 1 seed in this tournament and what they could potentially do at the Garden?
It's very different to be the hunted. I talk about other fan bases talk about St. John's, right? I got UConn fans in my mention for the last week. UConn knows what it's like to have the bullseye on their back. St. John's has become the opponent for everybody else that is circled on the calendar. Hey, we need to beat them if we want to improve our resume. Hey, we need to beat them, and if we want to get into the tournament, get off the bubble, kind of like that. The thing is that St. John's, Providence has been tough twice. They just were a difficult matchup for St. John's. I thought Villanova has had St. John's number this year. Xavier scares me because they can get hot. Those are the 3 teams, honestly, that I'm most scared of. I'm not that concerned about playing UConn again. I am not overly concerned about playing Marquette, which I know they're going to be playing again on Saturday. Creighton is hit or miss, but honestly, those 3 teams, which is surprising, I'm not as worried about those 3 teams as I am Villanova and Eric Dixon, who every single time he has played St. John's makes 3 after 3 that is preposterous. Wooga Poplar is one of the most unheralded players in this conference, and I think that Xavier has been tremendous. I think listen, for St. John's sake, I think that squeak into the tournament is going to help a lot of things in the Big East overall, but I think that you guys can do it. And Providence just has been that pesky team that has been tough to deal with, tough guard play. But when it comes down to it, that 8-9 game probably scares me more than any other game that you could possibly put out there.
Yep. All right. Last question for you, Dave. Heading into the NCAA tournament, once you get past MSG, things get big time in the NCAA tournament for the first time for St. John's in decades. And I just am sitting here right now on the night of March 4th, wondering what the ceiling for you is for this team. Do you think that this is a team? Because I believe this. I'm curious what you think on whether you fully believe that this St. John's team is a team that is built to be able to make a Final Four this season.
100%. For the first time, I can say that confidently. And it's because of the defense, and it's because of Rick Pitino. This team is fully bought in. There was no overt, crazy celebration on Saturday. This team has a goal. It's the Elite Eight. It's the Final Four. And for St. John's fans forever, that's been pie in the sky. That's been us being delusional fans in October and September. It's real this year. There is such tangible evidence. We're talking about a 17-2 team in the conference. It's unheard of in Queens. But this team has the makeup and it has the bodies. When you have Kadari Richmond, who has been absolutely phenomenal since January 1st. When you have Zubi Ejiofor, who is one of the best players in the country, best big men, and the way that he can defend. When you have RJ Lewis, who is a potential pro next season. There are so many pieces that line up. And then there's the defense. The defense will carry you. And I think we have seen that in March. And I think that this team can do it. What's the ceiling? I truly believe it's the Final Four. I can't believe I can say that with a straight face. And I'm sure people can call me a homer, and I understand. But I'm not alone here. And this team has the mental makeup for it. And if they can hit shots, and if they continue to hit this 36%, which they have over the last 5 games from deep, they will be a very difficult out. And don't put this team in the East region where they can play at Providence or at Newark, because you will see a sea of red in either of those arenas, because you have a starving fan base that hasn't been to an NCAA tournament game or has won an NCAA tournament game in 25 years. And you have fans that will pay whatever it costs to be there and see Rick Pitino coach St. John's in the NCAA tournament and hopefully win multiple games.
Dave, really appreciate you coming on tonight to talk about the Johnnies. Where can people find your stuff?
You could follow me on Twitter at Dave2Es_8, and I'm the host of the Eye on the Storm podcast, covering all things St. John's basketball.
Appreciate it, Dave. Talk soon, and I'll see you next week at Madison Square Garden.
Wouldn't miss for the world.